Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Abduction Victim to Survivor. My name is Abby, and I am your host, along with my friend Sarah. Our podcast is about family abduction, custodial conflict, and the stories of those who've lived through it. Their stories are filled with pain, hope, and resilience. I am very passionate about dispelling the myth that when a child is taken by a parent or family member, it's okay. You will see from the personal stories shared here and from the experts that it is not okay. You will learn about the harm it causes to the abducted child, the searching parents, and those who love them. I do my best to create a safe space for people to share heartfelt, painful, and difficult conversations to help you understand family abduction and show those with lived experience that they are not alone. This is personal for me because my son was abducted from me and his life when he was 10 years old. And Sarah, as a child just 4 years old, was abducted by her father. Family abduction is a global issue. Cases cause trauma and heartache for all involved. I want to emphasize that time is of the essence when it comes to recovering abducted children. The longer they remain missing, the more pain and trauma the children will experience. We're very honored to have as our guest today Amanda, who was abducted as a child by one of her parents, and she's going to be sharing her story with us. She's very courageous. You'll be able to see how she's had tremendous traumatic growth and where she is today in the really good work that she's doing. So, Amanda, please, wherever you want to start with your story, I know our audience is looking forward to hearing from you.
All right. As they said, I'm Amanda. I'm an attorney here in Omaha, Nebraska. Uh, I actually got into law because of a lot of my history. And the biggest thing that stuck with me as a kid, there was two things. Well, three things. I wanted to be an author to write about some of the stuff that I went through. I wanted to be in one of the intelligence agencies. I was dead set on the CIA. That was too much travel for me. And the other one was I wanted to be an attorney because I there was an attorney in my cases when I was younger that I really looked up to, and I wanted to be just like them. And I wanted to help kids so no other kids had to go through what kind of me and my siblings went through. And that's kind of how I got here. The I guess the most interesting part was I was taken as a kid. I was taken, I believe on my 6th birthday. My m uh, my mom just kinda while all my siblings were at school, my dad was at work, my mom kinda just picked me up. She threw me in the back of the car, we drove down to Texas where one of her friends were located, and then she actually had been having an online relationship with a man in England, and what I remember back then is in Texas, right before you have to go on these international flights, you have to get a long slew of shots, which I don't know. Shots are terrifying to begin with, but when you're that young, they literally had them on like a little spinning thing, and it was a giant one that span, and there was just a bunch because I didn't have everything I needed to go. So we got that and immediately got a passport photo the same day. And then she booked the flight and we were gone. Um, I remember the flight a bit, just because I remember I was a very energetic kid, and I was very curious, very friendly. I had these stuffed animals that I had in my crib from my dad's parents from way back when they had given me these, and I kept them with me everywhere. And it was like a little stuffed dog, little stuffed cat, and I was trying to run up and show all the flight attendants these. I was like, "Hey, look, look, look! This is where I'm from." And I just remember my mom, and excuse my French, she had a very colorful language, but just telling me to sit the fuck down or shut the fuck up, because nobody needed to know we were here. And, as a kid, that doesn't really seem too much to you. You're like, "Oh, shoot, I got in trouble." Looking back, probably should have sparked some things, but we ended up landing in England, and I lived there for a little over a year, I wanna say, with my mom's boyfriend at the time. She ended up marrying him, and my then stepbrother, uh, and he was right around the same age too. Very timid little thing. Me and him actually still talk even though we don't talk to any of the parents. Um, and yeah, I lived in England for a bit. It was quite an adjustment when I left. I was in Florida when I left, and I left 2 sisters and a brother who were there. There's a group of, like, 9 of us all together, but for that group, we had always stuck together. Like, me and my other sisters, other than this, had never been separated. Um, and when she took us, she took just me. So, I'm the youngest, and I very much clung to my second oldest, and then she was gone. Uh, so in England, me and this other little boy bonded really close, and we were each other's support system. Because while she may have been my mother, she was probably not the best person for me. She was very chaotic, she was very abusive, and she lashed out if things did not go her way. And she was very much the typical, she had anchor kids, if that makes sense. And I was the youngest anchor kid of that group. And then when she went to this other guy, she actually ended up getting pregnant with twins. Um, and life did not go so well. Just because once she has a new anchor kid, she forgets the rest. Um, for that grouping, me and that little boy, like I said, got really close because he endured some pretty bad abuse at her hands. And then I was more defiant. um, and me and him got in a lot of trouble. Unfortunately, he took the brunt of it because he tended to be more, she went after people she seen weaker than her. Um, and he was more likely to take it and not do anything. But that was that. I could tell you a whole host of chaotic that happened. I mean, she tried to enroll me under in a different school. Uh, she tried to enroll me into kindergarten programs down there because they start at a younger age. And it wasn't looking good that his son had been in one, but I was not. And his son was telling everybody about the sister he had, the same age. And the school actually had started inquiring about, you know what, why isn't this kid in it? I remember touring the school with them, the rooms that they were gonna put us in. Um, I remember a little bit about the school myself, and then I remember her changing my name. So when I went down there, my name was no longer Amanda Greer, it was Amanda Robinson, and I could only refer to myself as Robinson, and I was his kid. I was nobody else's. I had no other siblings but my stepbrother, and obviously the twins that were on the way. Obviously, that was kinda chaotic. Didn't get to reach out to any of them, was told not to really talk about them, not to, act like they weren't there, right? You were starting over, it was a whole new life. Um, then halfway, like, a little towards the end of the year, she actually ended up miscarrying the 2 twins. Or not she had them, but they were stillborn.
Uh,
So then she got a little bit more chaotic. And actually, they ended up finding us. So I remember towards the end of it, I actually got a call from my dad, and I hadn't been able to speak with anybody in about a year. And I just remember my dad asking me, seeing how I was, and he's the kind of guy that was like, you know what? Do you want to stay up there? That's your mom. I'll miss you. I love you. I'll visit you, but do you want to stay? Is that what you want? Obviously, I wanted to come home.
yeah.
It would suck because I formed a really tight bond with my stepbrother, and like I said, we still talk to this day. Um, but it was essentially a 6, 7-year-old, you shouldn't have to make that kind of choice. I remember that after that call, things moved very, very quickly for me. They packed up, like, middle of the night and moved. We ended up going to stay in Scotland a bit, which was where his parents had been located, and I kinda remember that. His parents were not the nicest to me. I was not the product of him. They thought my mom was using him. I was an outsider. I didn't have very good manners, even though, like, and it was simple. I might not have had the greatest manners, but from what I remember saying, "Can I?" And I was always told I was rude. That was not how you do it. It was, "May I?" Uh, I didn't always say things correctly. Um, and we were there for a little bit, and then I remember my mom and her husband at the time panicking, and they picked us up again, and they ran off. And, what I remember so I remember being taken to, like, a lake area, and I remember all sorts of camping stories, and for me, it was so cool, they had never wanted to camp before. "We're going to go camping. I'm camping with my stepbrother. This is great. You know what? We're living off of freaking pizza, and it's great." Except for pineapple pizza, and who eats that? But they were telling us stories about the Loch Ness Monster, so I'm throwing food into the lake and getting yelled at for it because, I wanna feed the monster, and how dare I waste food? Um, and then the next thing I know, there's a bunch of people really quickly that we're trying to get stand in line to something, and a bunch of these people come, and it's pretty much we're surrounded. I remember I get to talk with my dad. My dad shows up. He comes up. He actually gets to come pick me up, and we leave. So, from what I heard from my dad, and then I got to hear my mother's story a long time afterwards, was we were on our way to get on the Dublin ferry, and they actually shut down the ferry so that we couldn't transfer. And that's where they ended up picking me up. I remember after that, my dad was like a whole new guy after that. Like I said, it was all very exciting until you realize later on that what happened wasn't what you remember it happening. So as kids, we make adventures out of everything, and that's what happened. I ended up going back home, uh, and my dad actually ended up turning into a very severe alcoholic after that. I mean, he tried. This is a guy who had cleaned himself up. He was a master mechanic. He was not always he was smart in a workman type way. He had always been a little on the brass side. He always liked his drink, but he cleaned himself up, learned all the international rules, worked hand in hand with actually Julia, and ended up fighting tooth and nail to get me back, which is why they got me back so early. I'm told those cases take a lot longer. Um, Especially with her traveling to 3 different countries to try and run. But they had good tracking on her. And then afterwards, I just watched him landslide. He was good for a bit. I wasn't allowed out of his sight. I had to be right there. And of course, I was daddy's girl after that. I had to be everywhere. Uh, it got to the point where I shoot you not, he my hair ended up getting shaved like a little boy's and little boy clothing. I was in his workshop 24/7. Like that, he probably took it severely the other way, but that was him.
Yeah.
Uh, and then he turned into a pretty rough alcoholic after that because he ended up losing one of his kids. Then he ended up having, and the state of Florida actually ended up awarding him custody of all kids because of this, because she just took one and ran and abandoned everyone else. And just the weight of that, the weight of having all these kids on your own. She stole some things, stole some, or sold some stuff before he left. It ruined part of his business to have to take off to come out to get me. And then, so that was always an issue. And then, like with my siblings, that became a very big issue. My oldest sibling, well, second oldest, so in the grouping, she was then took on this maternal persona. She had to be the mom of the group. She had to keep eyes. She did not want anybody going without her. I mean, stuck together. The second oldest sister had abandonment issues. Uh, After that, it was bad. She lashed out, especially at anybody that she thought got any more attention than she did, because she felt she was left behind. So any maternal figure she then clung to, whether or not they were family, they were good, she clung to them, and she got kind of herself a self-worth from that. Um, Me and her actually never ended up being very close unless she got in times of trouble, and then she would call me and we'd get close until she got better, and then she'd cling to the next maternal figure. She's doing well now, but it took time processing. But that was kind of the effect it had on us. My brother at a young age ended up having to cause it caused some issues for him too. He was very young, and then he felt like he had to provide now for all these kids because my dad couldn't do it. So he would step in and help. And like I said, it got a little rough after that. When I say my dad landslided, he spiraled. Um, we actually ended up for a little bit. I was there for maybe a few months again before I was taken for a second time.
Oh,
Yeah.
how did that happen? But
So like I said, my dad landslided. We grew up with a lot of the time we had lice after that. We had unclean premises. We didn't have food, or we had food from the churches. We didn't have electricity, or we had our groceries out in the snow. Things like that, right? And he was constantly moving around trying to find someplace that didn't have memories with him and her. And on top of that, someplace where he could start over new. Um, and every time you thought he got himself cleaned up, just she would come back in like a wrecking ball or send a message and he'd landslide. We ended up in Dubuque, Iowa, and he ended up calling another sibling of mine. And I, this is how bad this was. We never knew she even existed till she picked us up. She was only 25 and she took in three young kids among some others she was caring for. They drove overnight to get to us. They picked us up before CPS could because he called her and he said, "Hey, they're coming tomorrow. I'm probably going to lose these kids. Please pick them up so that they can stay together." And yep. So then she took me or took us as a group. And then my mother came down. So it took her a long time to get her passport back in order because apparently she had some kind of suspension after all of that. Like she wasn't allowed back in. um, she came down. My sister, young, didn't know what to do, then started communication with the mother and trusted her for a bit. And then my mom started trying to take people and try and do what she did originally. Um, and so my sister was fought between, do I send them back to the dad who can't necessarily care for them, or do I send them back to the mom who's not, who's abusive? While she may care for them physically, she can't, she was abusive. And so she got with an attorney here in Nebraska. And it used to be a very popular aspect of law to, if you were going to file emergency custody, you had to ensure you had the children for so long that you were the primary, that you were. So she made a decision that she went and she took all three kids of us out of school. Um, Before either my mother or my father knew, she came up in the middle of the day. And I just remember her because I'm about to turn 8. uh, About to turn 8, and she's going, "If I don't take you now, I'll never see you again. Your mom's trying to take you." And of course, by this time, I've lived here for a year. I've got a whole new family that I never knew I had among with my group. I don't want to go anywhere. So she took us. She took us to the house that we were at with our mother, let us in. We gathered some of our stuff. And me being young and dumb, I didn't want to hurt anybody. I left a note. Um, so again, they found us a lot quicker than they should have. Not that they shouldn't have, but and I just said, "You know what? I love you, but I have to go." Uh, And I left those 2 stuffed animals that I talked about originally right there with that note. And we left. And she took us down to Mexico, and we were there for a bit as well, so that she could file and get custody. And then started a 10-year battle between everybody. And yeah, that was kind of my story. We went through a lot through all of that. And the attorney she ended up getting afterwards in Nebraska to kind of help fight this case, he's the one that I modeled after being. He's the only attorney. So as a kid, like I said, I was very persnickety. I had an opinion. I very much had a compass. Right was right, wrong was wrong. Uh, and I wanted to stick to it. And he's the only one that was in court when I seen somebody lie or I seen somebody say something and it didn't make sense to me. I'd sit there and I'd scribble my little notes in the back seat and I would hand him, I would tap him on the shoulder in the middle trial and hand him my notebook. And he never got mad. He never ignored me. He'd stop, he'd grab it, he'd look at me and he'd go, and then on break, he'd explain why he couldn't ask something or he would ask something off the list. The coolest guy I ever met, especially with all of that going on. And he did. This guy fought tooth, nail, night, weekends. I remember going to his office on the weekends. Um, and I ended up actually reaching out to him when I was in high school because I knew I wanted to be an attorney. I didn't want any kids to ever go through that
Of course.
because it really messed up the dynamic between me and my siblings. And it messed up the dynamic with me and my parents and with all my relatives. I have a whole side of family that won't talk to us simply because I am my mother's child. And she took me and ran. And when she did that, she caused some issues. And that was it. We are
Wow.
forever marked because we are my mother's child. I've got a whole other side that won't talk to me because I'm my father's child.
My gosh. Oh, Amanda. Wow.
It's all right. You form bonds. We did. And so that's how I came to be here now. I stuck with that attorney. We bonded really well, and he helped me all the way through law school. And I actually worked with him for a while before I was like, you know what? I want to do more. I want to do criminal. I want to see how this all evolves. I want to be a part of this. So I went to another firm, and then I now realize his whole warning that, you don't want to do that was actually true. And I found my way back to a firm that's like, you know what? You have such a unique background because I do a little bit of everything. I specialize in like high conflict cases. So anything with kids in custody, that's my forte. But if you have high conflict, people taking advantage, I do those. Um, and so they're like, hey, why don't you come and and we'll give you an office, do whatever you want. And that's where I'm at now.
Wow. Wait, just to clarify one thing, the the person who took you to Mexico was your sister?
Yes, she would have
A
been,
25-year-old sister?
yeah, a half
Wow.
sister, her and her
Half
husband.
Wow, and how long were you in Mexico?
That's a good question. I don't quite know. I know I wasn't there quite a year,
Okay.
uh, but I know we were definitely there more than a few weeks because we missed a bunch of school.
Uh,
Wow. And then did somebody find you there, or did they end up, like, having to go back to the States?
So they had to go back to the States because my mom found that note and immediately talked to her attorneys. And yeah, that was my bad. So then it caused a whole
Oh.
issue.
Oh, no, you were just trying to make s do something right, you were just so young. But my gosh, I don't think I've ever heard anyone's story of being bounced around as much as you have been, and so many different people, and some new situations, and people going in and out of your life, and these different sets, as you called them, groupings of siblings. It is so fragmented. I can't even. Wow, I'm just so blown away just by the little bit that I'm imagining of what that fragmentation and intensity must have been like. Wow. and different countries and different people, and then you're connected to this one and disconnected from that. And yeah, I have so much I'd love to know how your relationship with your dad and mom moved through all of these different fragmentations and experiences. And wow, yeah, it's I'm still taking it all in. I think I'm a little, like,
Yeah.
dizzy from
Yeah.
trying to, just even imagine what this must have begin to imagine what this must have been like for you and your whole family, your siblings too.
Yeah. It sounds like it had a profound effect on them also. And what it meant to them to be, as you said, left behind. And you said one of them had abandonment issues, I think. And
Yeah,
yeah.
so all 3 kids ended up suffering from some form of abandonment issues. The middle one actually ended up having it probably the worst out of all of us. So she really clung to any maternal figure afterwards. So she was actually taken for a day by a CPS worker who formed a bond with her because she was the most. Again, this is a side story, but during that time that I had just gotten back, right after he had spiraled, we lived in Missouri for a bit, and social services was called because we were showing up uh, to school with lice. We didn't have any food. We weren't dressed well. We were dirty. Our house was dirty. He would leave 3 kids while he went off to work because he had nobody and he had no option. So, I mean, I realistically was 7-ish. That would have made my next sister 9 and the next one 10. So, I mean, 3 kids alone. Um, and we wondered, and we were the kids that jumped in sewers, walked across town, no fear. Um, but a CPS person was called to investigate, and she actually ended up getting into a romantic relationship with my dad instead.
Gosh.
And formed a really me and my oldest sister kind of formed this pact. We didn't like her. We didn't want her in there. Something wasn't right. Why was she here? It also didn't help that during that time frame, I had a pretty severe injury, and she didn't want to take me to the ER because if they knew that that was there and she hadn't reported it, she was going to get in trouble. Um,
She.
I had a firework artillery shell actually end up exploding in my side, um, because I went to correct it and it shot up into my arm.
Oh, how
And
Oh
painful.
my
Wow.
god.
yeah, I'm lucky. All my injuries I tend to heal pretty good. But she got to a point where she was done with my dad and she took my sister, my middle sister, because she had bonded with her and tried to flee. Um, it did not last. Like I said, it was less than a day. Yeah, my dad was like, you know what? I'll call the cops. I'll call your office. I will call all this. You will bring my kid back. Um, Obviously, she brought my kid, his kid back. And yeah, ever since, like I said, she just clung to maternal after that. And then she had a little bit of abandonment issue. Why would she leave me? And then it was she also had well, she took me, see, I'm the better kid. And it's like, hey,
Wow.
yeah, she
So
felt,
many wow, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, just like the boundary issues, like that, just like there's no boundaries, no norms, no nothing. It's just like, yeah, uh, one chaotic scene after the other. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
I
I'm just
feel
taking
yes,
this in.
I feel the same way, Sarah. It's very, I mean, it has so many different, I guess, chapters to it where you were taken by this person, then you were returned, and then you were taken by this person, and then you were taken by this person. And it was so chaotic for you. And
Yeah.
no wonder you want to help other kids.
From the time I was 6 to the time I was roughly right around maybe 13, it was the game of keep away. So I lived with my dad, I lived with my mom, I lived with my sister. They dropped us off with her brother. We got dropped off with an aunt. It was a keep away. If you don't take these kids, they're going to take them and flee. So then I'm gonna take them and flee. And yeah,
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I don't I'm like, I'm still in a little bit of shock. Um, what do you feel like the system protected you? Or not really? I mean, I think I know the answer, but are sometimes it's just hard to kind of yeah.
I can tell you, and this is not to speak bad on the system overall, CPS failed us. There was no doubt in my mind. In Missouri, in Iowa, in all the we lived it, we bounced around so many states it was crazy. They failed us on that front. The schools definitely failed us. The amount of times we showed up with markings or bruises or without the right clothing, or I mean, I had a school counselor in Missouri when we had lice said, you know what, you can't get rid of lice. She told our dad to dump gasoline on our head and get rid of lice.
Oh my God.
My dad, who didn't know any better, dumped gasoline on all three of our heads to get rid of lice.
Oh my god.
And I still to this day cannot stand the smell of it because I remember my head in the sink getting it poured and going so dizzy.
Mm,
But he didn't know any better. And the counselor said, this is how you get rid of it. And they definitely failed us.
my
They
god.
definitely failed us.
Especially that one who crossed the boundaries and had a romantic relationship with your father.
You know what? I hear he was quite the Casanova, but yes,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
uh, she wouldn't have been the only one. There
Wow.
was a few. So, like I said, DHHS failed us. When we got to the court system here in Nebraska, things got a bit better because a judge got in here and he's like, hold on, none of this sounds right. So he actually ended up putting permanent guardianship with my sister because she was the best option out of everything. And he's like, nothing that anybody did was okay. He's like, mom's failed you. Here's all of this. She fled. Here's the Florida decree where she quite literally abducted a kid and left. Dad failed you. Here's the Iowa stuff. Sister probably shouldn't have taken you and you shouldn't have been bounced around. However, she's stable here. She's not moving. And she did. This she was 25. She could have traveled. She had a husband. She could have gone anywhere. And she sat in a house where she couldn't quite afford the payments after a while because I mean, there was three of us, and then she had a whole nother family that she was taking care of in that house that weren't hers but were related to her husband. And like he's like, you know what, you seem to be the most caring. And she did. She had her own issues from abandonment from our mom, and our mom kind of took her and moved all around, and she didn't know her dad, and she did her best.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
I
Wow.
who did you spend the bulk of your childhood with from the time um, you were with your sister? Were you with your sister the rest of the time, or who took care of you?
when I came and lived with my sister down here, when she came and took us in for a little bit, she had us go and live with our mom who came down because she needed help. She was 25. She didn't know how to fight this case. So we lived with my mom for a while. And then we went and we moved with our dad for a while. And then I got split from the group and I was a troublemaker. I mean, I wouldn't say I was mischievous. Everybody else who has that voice in their head that says don't do it, I grew up with a voice that went, well, what if? And if I heard what if, I couldn't help it. I had to know. I had to know what was going to happen. Um, so I got split off, and both my sisters stayed with my one, and I got split off with my dad for a bit. And that was a couple months until she realized, hey, he's not he's not able to take you to school and do your stuff. So then I got brought back, and then my oldest sister got kicked out of the house, and she was just gone forever at that point. Um, so I spent most of that time. That's why I can't tell you how that went. For the most of my life, though, I can say I spent it with my sister. From then on, she was the house I was in, but not with the same sect of kids. Each kid got kicked out or taken, or yeah, it's
Wow.
it's a bit.
What
My
chaos!
lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. Such chaos. And it sounds like the parental abduction was just not just, but was kind of like just one of so many chaotic and traumatic and life altering events with these deeply flawed and irresponsible parents who really could not take care of you properly,
Yeah.
to put it mildly.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Sorry.
No, oh, please.
Don't be
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. Not at
It's
all. Not at
it's
all. It just
it's a
yeah.
yeah.
How did you get to be the person you are today, where you wanna help others, where it's not easy to get your law degree, to pass the bar, to, be a litigator. Those are not easy things. You're so poised and, um, appear to be well-adjusted, and how did you get here?
So obviously that whole background, trauma tends to change the way you think about things.
Oh,
Trauma
absolutely.
tends to change the way you adapt.
Yes.
Um, my oldest sister turned really spacey. My middle sister turned really, she was what we call the chameleon. Whoever she was with is who she changed to be. That was her form of adaptation. Mine, I grew up with the logo forgive and forget. Uh, if it doesn't help, forget it. Uh, I got told roughly in high school that was a bad motto because if you forget, you don't learn. Um, so that was kind of my thing was forgive, forget, move on. And then it really formed my pillar for family. For me, family is there no matter what. And I knew no matter what, I wanted a strong family and I wanted to help kids so that they didn't ever feel like I did. Um, I was the black sheep in one household. I was the pariah in another. And in the other household, I was the forgotten kid. Um, I knew that I didn't want any kid to go through any of those situations. None of them. And the only time that I ever really felt truly seen was, like I said, when I was in court. And that attorney could have been like any of the others. He could have gotten mad at me. He could have ignored me. He could have, but he literally sat down there. He seen me for me. He answered my questions. He explained how it helped. And then afterwards, he would. He's like, this is what you want. He's like, this is how you get there. He's like, we can choose to do A, B, and C, or this is the outcomes. Like he literally sat and it made so much sense to me. And for me, when I grew up the rest of that time with my sister, I went through a lot of things and I just kept thinking, you know what? I want to be like him. He gave us his personal number, even the kids. And he's like, if anything happens, call me. And so when I went through high school, to be honest, I almost failed high school. Rules were not my friend in terms of academics. I couldn't do them. It and a lot of ours were like, "Hey, you have to write these emotional things about your history, what made you," and I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And if I told the teachers even a sliver of my past, I was called a liar.
Oh gosh.
I had to have my oldest sister actually come in and she got into some matches with some of these teachers. Like she was like, I can bring in the court cases. She's like, don't you ever. Um, and it ended up going to those, you know what, push through, push through. So I was determined in high school. I was like, you know what? They told me I was going to fail. I'm not going to fail. I, and like I said, it changes your way of thinking. It turned my brain into photographic. Um, so in terms of high stress, if I get overly stressed, my brain switches from understanding to photographic. And I can picture things and that's how I remember. Well, that helped me on testing. And then I got through the ACT and I actually ended up, so I never completed a college application because I got terrified of change. I didn't want to leave my house with my sister. It also changed me in that way. I didn't want to leave that. That was my family. That was my home. I, I was scared of the unknown. I was scared of change. So I never completed a college application. But what I did is I scored really, really well on that ACT and I submitted my score to a bunch of schools. And UNO was like, hey, I see you started this application. You got this, you got the score. How about you come in? We'll do a full ride. We'll put you in the honors. We'll do this. We'll let you choose whatever you want to choose. And that little bit of freedom kind of gave me my footing. I did that. I contacted the attorney here. I walked in with my little paperwork, my resume, I was nervous as hell. And I'm sorry. And he's like,
That's a
hey, like, this is informality. You're hired. And for him, because he would take me to all these cases right off the bat, I was supposed to be a file clerk. But he took me to some of these high litigation custody because that's what he does. And he wanted to see how I would do in them. Well, again, trauma. I grew up with these. I knew the ins and outs of these relationships. Things just, if it didn't add up, it struck me. So I'd sit there and I'd take notes. I'd circle things that didn't make sense. I'd write my own questions. And in breaks, he'd take them. And he's like, oh, hold on. He's like, have you ever thought of being an attorney? Because you're keeping up with this. And he's like, and those are good questions. And that was a good catch here. So after that, he took me to every single trial that I could get into. Um, we ended up being the dream team. I could do all the back end. I knew where everything was. I knew if somebody was testifying, like I said, I had that photographic memory. I'd be like, hold on. Does that make sense though? Because I know when I was in that situation, I didn't think like that. I know my siblings didn't think like that. Something usually else is happening. And then lo and behold, it usually is. So then I got through college. And then the law school, I got a couple different offers. I got into UCLA, Stanford. I got Lincoln. I got Creighton. And again, scared of change. I almost didn't submit any of those. He literally sat me down in my office and he's like, I'll pay you to study. He's like, but you need to submit these. I know you're scared, but you need to submit your resume or submit your things. And yeah, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have submitted any of them because I was terrified of change. Um, and he did the same thing with the LSAT. He sat me down and he's like, Amanda, I know you. And we went through the application process. And yeah, it was chaotic, but that's how I ended up being here. It him.
Amazing.
It makes so much
Wow.
sense that you would be afraid of change and that you had so much trouble with those applications because for most of your life, you had absolutely no control over what happened to you. Everything was done to you. And so that makes perfect sense.
I can say with my college ones too. My biggest thing is I always grew up and I wanted to leave the house. Uh, some stuff going on. I wanted to leave. And part of it too was I always told, if you leave, you're never coming back. And my sister told me that was her biggest fear is if I left, I was never going to come back home. And she would always say, oh, isn't that scary? You're not going to have your family. You're not going to have that. And again, that was her way of trying to protect in the only
Yep.
way she knew.
And
But
control you. Yeah.
it caused
Yeah.
issues, like, even to this day, terrified of moving jobs, afraid of losing relationships, but we're processing. We're learning.
Yes. Yes. You're
Wow.
doing a marvelous job of growing and thriving. I hope you know that and you're very proud of yourself.
Yeah. It's
Thanks.
Yeah.
amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you
Yep.
so much for sharing your amazing story and incredible resilience on every front and at every hurdle.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really remarkable.
Mhm.
Thanks. I
Yeah.
mean, my biggest achievement now after all of this is I've had a couple cases that's come in and they've called and they were kids like me. And we got a kid back from Florida. Mom had just picked up the kid and left. And for no other reason than I gave birth, it's my kid. Nope. Brought that kid back because obviously there's effects on how that affects. I had one get picked up and taken across state lines to a tribe. Uh, that one we had to go to the FBI and other jurisdictions because that's not something we can technically step into.
That's right.
Tribal
Those are hard. Yeah.
tribes have their own laws,
Right.
and once that kid steps foot into the territory, it's a different ballgame. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, it shaped the kind of cases I took too. I didn't take run of the mill. I took the ones where, it's still what I get into trouble too with this day is I'll take the poorer cases. I'll take the cases that's maybe not generate the most money, um, because if I see those kids suffering, I can't. I can't. And I've been known, I'll lecture my own client. But you will act right or you won't be my client. And
Mm,
kid first.
yeah. Wow.
If there is one thing that you would like to leave our audience with about your experience in family abduction, what do you want to leave them with?
I'll say your past really doesn't define you. It's who you choose to be with that. Uh, I could be like some of my siblings and just blame the world and say, you know what, it's because of how I grew up. But you know what? We grew up the same. And I believe it's who you choose to be. Those who go through adversity, you see who their real character is through that.
Yeah, yeah,
Beautiful.
I believe that too. I believe that we do have choices and that our challenges are what help us grow. If everything was going smoothly, you don't grow. You stay stagnant. But those challenges, you have a choice. You can either let them break you or you can grow from them. And you have definitely grown. Definitely. Beautifully. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I had a lot of help along the way. There was people at every turn helping. Like my husband, his dad came and got me in the middle of the night during a thunderstorm. It was pouring rain. I had no items. I'd gotten kicked out, and he took me in. I wouldn't have gone to law school without him either. So, I mean, there was always somebody else helping. It wasn't just me.
Mm.
Yeah.
But you asked for help and you were willing to receive it. That there's also that. So, it's yeah, that it's a combination of factors, but first and foremost, your own initiative and resilience and
Yeah.
choices and all of that. So,
Your strength.
wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very strong.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda. And we really appreciate your being with us today and the courage that you had to share the story and yeah, the hope that you've shared. Really, it is a story of hope and to show other people who have had similar experiences that they too can come on top, come up on top and be successful and thrive. Thank you very much.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. On behalf of us and our listeners, thank you so, so very much for being so brave and for everything you do for kids and families. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting me. And I'm sorry if that was a little chaotic.
It was
It was a
there
chaotic
was no
childhood.
your life
Yeah.
was chaotic. The way you
Mm.
told your story was not chaotic. So, yeah. So thank you. And I hope everyone will just stay for another minute or two because we are going to be showing you a poster of a missing child. So thank you very much for being here. And Amanda, really, thank you. Today we are featuring Kaye Young Almeida. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. He is just such an adorable little boy. He's been missing since November 18th, 2025 from Mountain View, Hawaii. He's 2 years old now. He was last seen on November 28th, and he may be in the company of his father. If you have seen him or you know anything about Kayak, please call the Hawaii County Police Department at 808-935-3111 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, their tip line at 1-800-THE-LOST. If you are just on platforms where you're listening, like Spotify or Apple, and you're not able to see Kayak's poster, I encourage you, please go to missingkids.org where you can see Kayak, and they actually have 4 different pictures of him. So you can be certain that you'll recognize him. He needs your help, and you can be his voice. So I hope that you will go to the website. And thank you so much for tuning in today. Amanda did just a wonderful job of telling her story. She's a very brave and courageous young woman, and she is really the epitome of resiliency. If you have any questions, I'm happy to do my best to answer them and would really appreciate your comments and suggestions. You can reach me at the email abduction.victimtosurvivor@gmail.com. You can also follow the podcast on our Facebook page, Abduction, Victim to Survivor. I really hope that you will subscribe and leave a review or a comment. I believe your support will help people find their voices and the strength to tell their stories. If you or someone you know is facing family abduction, custodial conflict, or their aftermath, please reach out to me. You're not alone. We'll see you next Tuesday on Abduction, Victim to Survivor. Thank you.